Our next speaker is Marty Shumway. Marty has more than 20 years of experience in the mining and petroleum industries. He also has extensive experience with both exploration and development of oil and gas properties in the Appalachian Basin. Marty earned his bachelor's and master's degree in engineering from The Ohio State University. Mr. Shumway is president of Shumway Resources, LLC, which is formed as a consulting company providing various engineering, geological, and geophysical services to the oil and gas industry, specializing in the Appalachian Basin. Mr. Shumway is a licensed professional engineer in Ohio and holds a certifications issued by the American Association of Petroleum Geologists and a certified petroleum geologist with the Society of Independent Professional Earth Scientists. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marty.
Good morning, and thank you for coming to this talk. It's my privilege to do this. I think this is the second year for OOGA. And this presentation is kind of an overview of activity in Ohio in 2015. So I want to let everybody know there's a ton of information in here. Some of it is not very easily digestible in the minute that the slide will be on the screen. So I'd encourage you to contact me and then also check on the OOGA website probably this afternoon, where the content of the presentation will be up on the website. So we'll get started here. I want to acknowledge some contributions from Bill Arnholt, Northwood Energy, and Tim Knobloch from James Knobloch Petroleum Consultants. So what I'm going to talk about today is a bunch of things and a lot of tables and data and things that, like I said, are hard to digest. But first of all, we're going to talk about a general overview of Ohio oil and gas production historically and current. We're going to look at permit and completion summaries for wells drilled in 2015 in Ohio. We're going to look at some statistics on operator activity, footage drilled, numbers of wells, and then activity by county. What are the most active counties in Ohio? Taking a look at change of ownership of wells in Ohio, which we're starting to see a bit of an increase in that. And then we're going to take a quick look at IP analysis for wells drilled, for horizontal wells drilled in Ohio, and take a look at how those indicate the actual performance of the wells. And then we're going to look at the production reported for the year. Unfortunately, I don't have conventional production for 2015. It hasn't been released yet, but we have good horizontal well data that's now released quarterly by ODNR. Then we'll talk a little bit, I'm going to talk just briefly about Utica EURs and some work that we've done calculating EURs for various wells and areas. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Class 2 injection wells in Ohio, where they are and what kind of volumes they're injecting and some other things like that. So I'd like to make a note that this entire review is based on public data that's available from ODNR. As you can imagine, there's some challenges with that. We've done our best to kind of go through and call the data and pull out what we think is important to talk about. So just briefly, oil and gas production in Ohio. Historically, there's been over 275,000 oil and gas wells drilled in the state of Ohio since 1860. There's more than 50,000 producing wells in Ohio today. 49 of 88 Ohio counties have reported production in the last few years. Just a quick history of development in Ohio and when certain plays got started and what kind of impact they had on the number of wells. And we're going to look at this in a different way later on in the presentation. But as you can see, we're in the late 1800s, the Northwest Ohio Lima, Indiana field was beginning to be developed, and there was a huge increase in activity. The Clinton play and the Central Ohio and the oily parts and some gas parts of the play were developed beginning in the early 1900s in Licking County and Knox County and a couple other counties. And I need my pictures so I can keep talking. So hydraulic fracturing, Sean mentioned that hydraulic fracturing in the 50s really opened up a lot of different plays in Ohio, and that's certainly true in Ohio. In the 50s and the mid-50s, the first Clinton and Berea wells were hydraulically fractured, and you can see the increase in wells drilled all the way up through 1984. And then the Morrow County Trempealeau, the Knox play, sort of overlaid on top there in the 60s. And then since '84, number of wells drilled has been on a pretty steady decline. In the 90s, we had a bump in wells that were mostly Rose Run and Knox unconformity wells again. And then an uptick in drilling in Clinton wells in the late 2000s, and then again a decrease till today. I don't have the Utica activity reflected on here. Really it's about 1,500 wells that have been drilled, so it would do another slight uptick on the number of wells drilled in Ohio. This presentation is historically a little dry, so I tried to throw some pictures in here to kind of keep you distracted, but this title slide here just has various pictures of activity around Ohio that were provided by my friend Larry Wickstrom in some of his travels around. So we'll get into some data here. The first thing we'll talk about, this is a little summary of permits and completions from the year 2010 to 2015. And the most important thing on here, in my opinion, is looking at the change in permits, which is in the far right column. So we had a decrease of about 40% on permits issued, an increase in completion reports this year, and then plugging reports also had a decrease, and a total decrease in permitting activity, both permits, completions, and plugging permits, is down about 20%. Looking at permits and completions by month, just let you digest this a little bit. It just kind of shows the trend and the flow in permits, monthly. Permitted formations, by and large, the Utica Shale Point Pleasant was the dominant formation that was permitted to drill. We had almost 700 Utica permits filed in 2015. Most of those permits that are tagged as Trenton, they're not Trenton wells, they're Utica wells as well. They're pilot holes or things like that. And then the Clinton following around with about 48 permits, and then the Knox unconformity with about 45 permits, and then the rest. This is a map showing the locations of these permits. So the blue stars are completion reports that were filed in 2015. So you can see the bulk of those are in eastern Ohio and are Utica wells. Permits are the yellow dots, and so we've still got some activity, but we've got an awful lot of plugging permits basically over the entire state. We had 511 permits to plug this year. This is something that's probably better digested later after the talk, but this is just kind of a summary. The first number is the completions, permits to drill, and permits to plug by county in Ohio. Operators completing wells. So this is the number of operators that filed a completion report for a well that was drilled from 2004 to 2015. So as you can see, really since about 2009, the number of operators that are actively drilling and completing wells in Ohio has dropped off quite a bit, and we're down to 87 companies that are currently drilling in Ohio. Wells completed by type, there were 534 total completions in Ohio in 2015, 151 vertical wells, and 373 horizontal wells. The directional wells are conventional. And the unknown wells, I don't know. Horizontal completions by formation. This is a map showing the horizontal wells in Ohio. And the notable thing on here is the horizontal wells completed in the north there by Enervest, which we're going to hear Enervest give a talk about that later today. Vertical completions, so conventional completions. We had 27 Berea and shallower wells, about 16 Devonian shale wells, and then going on down the list, 46 Clinton Medina wells, and about 25 Knox unconformity, and then a few wells that were deeper. And most of those deeper wells are Class 2 injection wells that were completed. Class 2 injection wells by TD formation. So in here we have the formation that were targeted for these wells. The bulk of those wells were permitted sub-Knox, so below the Knox, somewhere in the Rome or even the Mount Simon earlier in the year. Mount Simon completions, we won't be seeing many or any of those going forward because the state has kind of precluded injection wells from targeting the Mount Simon sandstone. So completions by month, broken out by vertical wells in orange and horizontal wells in blue. And again, these are the dates that the completion reports were filed, not the dates that the wells went online or anything like that. This is when the completion report was filed with ODNR. Top 10 counties for completions. This year, Harrison County led the list. There were 90 total completions, and 88 of those were horizontal and 2 were vertical. And that was followed by Carroll, Belmont, Monroe, Guernsey, and Noble. Again, graphically looking at completions by county, Harrison again had 90. And then look over on the right, every other county in Ohio had 85 additional completions. So again, the bulk of the drilling is in Harrison, Carroll, Belmont, Monroe, and Guernsey County by far. Most active operators by wells. Chesapeake Energy in 2015 was responsible for 27% of the total wells drilled in the state, which is equivalent to, they drilled 144 wells. They're down 33% from 2014, and they're followed by Gulfport Energy, which is about half the number of wells that Chesapeake drilled. And then on down the list, Antero, Hess, Ascent, and Rice are the most active operators in Ohio in 2015. Taking a look at that column on the right, the change over last year, you see Rice has become much more active this year than they were in 2014. And those that are doing less this year is Chesapeake, Enervest, and Rex Energy down at the bottom there. The top 12 operators drilled approximately 75% of all wells in Ohio. Another picture for you to look at. This is a beautiful, nice-looking pad that's visible right off of I-70. And it's the well name is very descriptive, so we know where it is by the name of the well, which is kind of nice. So most active operators by footage drilled, and so this is obviously going to be dominated by the horizontal operators, but again, Chesapeake Energy is at the top. They drilled over 2 million feet in 2015, and this is total measured depth, so not just laterals. This is the total drilled footage, and that decrease is about 25% over last year. So they're just real simply, it appears that Chesapeake may be drilling slightly longer laterals because their number of wells percentage decrease was more than this. And Gulfport Energy is next with about half of the footage drilled as Chesapeake Energy. And again, the top 12 operators on this list drilled approximately 91% of all footage drilled in Ohio. Active counties by number of wells. Again, Harrison and Carroll are leading the charge, followed closely by Belmont, Monroe, and Guernsey. We reported completions in 34 of 89 Ohio counties in 2015. Last year, it was 38 of the 89 counties in Ohio. So 88% of the wells were drilled, or the completion reports were filed for wells drilled in the counties that are on this list. Active counties by footage. Here we flipped it a little bit, and Harrison County is actually the most footage drilled, and it's about 23% of the total footage, and it's a 71% increase over last year. So interesting to note on here, the Carroll County footage is significantly less this year, or in 2015, than it was in 2014, and big increases in footage drilled in Belmont, Monroe, and Guernsey County, and Noble to some extent. Drilling footage in wells by year. So this is a quick look at the history of drilling in Ohio, beginning back at the bottom of the list in the year 2001. And we're looking at, in 2001, we drilled 3.3 million feet. This was all vertical, all conventional drilling. In 2015, we drilled about 6.6 million feet. The other interesting thing is look at the number of wells that contribute to these totals and the footage per well. 2015 average total measured depth per well was over 12,000 feet. In 2001, or actually all the way up until 2011, that footage per well was 5,000 feet, roughly, or less. And again, looking at our transition from a conventional basin to unconventional, the average IP in gas is a pretty good indicator what kind of wells we're drilling today versus the wells that we drilled the rest of the history of oil and gas in Ohio. Change of ownership. This is an interesting thing that we sort of track just to get an idea of transfers and sales that are occurring on a well basis. The largest change of ownership this year was Broad Street Energy and Broad Street Services sold to M&R Investments of Ohio, LLC. So we had 3,603 wells that changed ownership this year. Here's another picture of a well site with a different kind of name than the CNX well. We got some creative names here, and this is the photograph on the lease road going into the well site. Top 12 counties. So I'm going to talk a little bit about IPs, and then I'm going to show you some other data about the IPs and talk a little bit about that. But looking at the average IP by county, top 12 counties. So as you can see, Belmont is at the top of the list. There's 64 wells included in this data set looking at these IPs. The average IP for oil, and I'll make a note that the only liquids that are reported to the state are oil and gas. So these oil numbers are lease condensate, crude oil combined. And my thought is that most of this liquids that are reported at the wellhead to ODNR are leasehold liquids, not gas processing or any additional value. So the average IP in MCFE, so we used a 15-to-1 ratio between oil and natural gas. I think that's still kind of a reasonable number, even with our depressed oil prices today, looking at it on more of an economic sense than an energy basis. But the average IP in Belmont County was 13,700 MCFE, and it's followed very closely by Monroe and Harrison and Guernsey County. Top 12 operators by average IP. Ascent Resources is at the top of this list. Their average reported IP to the state is almost 19,000 MCFE, and then followed by Hess, Antero, RE Gas. I didn't include any operators with less than 4 wells on this list, and again, these average IPs are calculated using an oil to gas ratio of 15-to-1. Just a visual graphic showing the top 12 operators by average IP, just kind of showing the distribution of those. This is the top 12 operators in Ohio today. So we have Ascent, Hess, Antero, Rex, Gulfport, Chesapeake, Eclipse, XTO, Rice, PDC, Enervest, and Northwood Energy on this list. Here's a graphical distribution of where these operators have wells. So the darkest red is Ascent Resources. So they're in kind of northeastern Guernsey County and Belmont. Chesapeake is all the yellow and Carroll and dropping down into Harrison County. And then Eclipse is in mostly Monroe and Belmont. And again, these colors are a little difficult to see, so I'd encourage you, if you're interested, to check the presentation online. So I talked a little bit about IPs, and my experience with IPs for most conventional wells is they're not really a good indicator of production. So I took some samples of IP data and production for wells that I had 2 full quarters of production with at least 150 days online for those 2 quarters, and restricted it to wells that came online in the late second quarter, early third quarter, trying to get a good snapshot of production over a reasonable time. So this is for crude oil reported to ODNR, and it's a pretty reasonable fit to the data between IPs and the sum of 2-quarter production for these wells. So I feel pretty comfortable looking at IPs for oil as a reasonable predictor of how well the production is going to be over time. Gas is a little different story. I think there's some other things in here that are affecting this. Mainly differences in measuring and reporting IPs, as well as some pipeline constrictions and things like that. But overall, again, it's a reasonable approximation of how well the production is going to be from these wells. So there are 68 wells in this data set. The bottom axis is the operator reported IP, and then the left y-axis is the sum of production over those 2 quarters. So I have a little more confidence in looking at IPs with these wells than I have historically with conventional wells. So this is one of my favorite well locations, and it's very near Coshocton. It's a conventional well and a nice looking tank battery. So producing wells by year. There's 2 ways to talk about producing wells by year. ODNR has a status indicator for wells that are not plugged and still operating as far as ODNR is concerned, but the actual number of wells that report production every year is a significantly different number. And so this is just a graph showing the number of producing wells. You can see in 2014 there's over 50,000 wells that are tagged as producing by ODNR, but actually only about 45,000 of those reported production in 2015. I assume that this number, the divergence between these two curves, is going to continue to get larger the next couple of years. So production summary. This is oil by year reported to ODNR going from 1990 to 2015. The light green color is conventional oil, and the dark green color is horizontal wells. So of particular note on here, 2015, our oil production in Ohio was almost 22 million barrels from unconventional wells and about 3.7 million barrels from conventional wells. So the horizontal production is about 5.5 times, the total 2015 production for Ohio is about 5.5 times what it was in 2011 before the horizontal wells began to be drilled. Other interesting things to note here, that 22 million barrels from horizontal wells is from 1,074 wells that reported production in 2015 and about 24,000 vertical wells. Like I said, the 2015 conventional production has not been released by the state yet. So what I did to estimate conventional production was looked at the decline over the last 4 years and just sort of moved it forward for 2015. Looking at gas, unconventional production gas is about 12.5 times what our total production in 2015 is about 12.5 times what it was in 2011. Over that time period, we went from 80 BCF a year to almost a TCF of gas in 2015. And again, gas was reported from 1,240 horizontal wells and about 37,000 vertical wells. So again, I mentioned I'd be looking at historical production a little bit. This is kind of an estimate of volumes of oil produced historically over time in Ohio. In the late 1800s in western Ohio, it's estimated that we produced about 24 million barrels of oil in the year 1896. That field development slowed down dramatically in the early 1900s when everybody went to spindletop. Looking down across the list, in the 40s, there was a big push for enhanced oil recovery to fuel the war efforts, and those are the couple bumps that you see down there in the 40s. 1952, the first well was hydraulically fractured in Ohio. And again, you can see the increase in production all the way till 1984 for the number of wells drilled, with the Trempealeau Knox play overlaid on top, which its peak production was in 1964, and it was about 16 million barrels that year. In 2010, our conventional production, or our total production, was about 4.7 million barrels. In 2015, 25.6 million barrels. And that's solely responsible from the Utica wells and the horizontal drilling. So this historical data has been compiled by Larry Wickstrom and others at ODNR over time. Taking a look at the age of wells in Ohio, this is kind of a confusing graph to look at, but I think the takeaway from this slide is the average well in Ohio is, 55% of the wells in Ohio are between 25 and 39 years old. And so this is average annual gas and average annual oil by age of well over time. Utica producing wells by operator. Again, you may want to digest this a little more at a different time, but basically showing where all the producing wells are. And the dominant theme on here is that pretty thorough development in Carroll County by Chesapeake, almost exclusively, with some Rex wells in there as well. So gas production by quarter. Looking at this back to the first couple quarters where we had a big increase in gas production, and the blue arrows are showing the quarterly increase in production, quarter by quarter. So we actually had a pretty big increase from the third quarter to the fourth quarter. In 2015, we had a 23% increase in gas production. Looking at oil, beginning in the second quarter, we had a pretty dramatic flattening of this curve quarter over quarter, beginning in the second quarter of 2015. And this is probably due to additional drilling in the dry gas areas of the play in Monroe and Belmont County. Utica wells online by quarter. It's amazingly consistent over the last 4 quarters, with about 12% growth per quarter in number of wells. So taking a look at Utica EURs, again, from 20,000 feet with state data, we used operator-reported production through the third quarter of 2015 to generate these curves, calculated EUR values for each well. We adjusted the EUR to a gas equivalent using a ratio of 15:1. And then we took a shot at determining the treated length or the stimulated interval for each well based on perf tops, perf bottoms, stimulation reports, whatever we had in the public record to generate those, and then normalize the EURs per 1,000 foot of lateral. And this was work that Tim Knobloch, James Knobloch Petroleum Consultants, has been working ongoing for the last 4 or 5 years. He's going to talk about that a little bit more this afternoon. So taking a look at this by township is kind of an interesting map. And again, this you may want to look at a little more closely. But basically, the brighter the color, the higher the estimated EUR per 1,000 foot of lateral in Ohio, based on the data that we have. So you can see down in Monroe and Belmont, we've got some pretty big numbers starting to come up on comparable to some areas in the Marcellus Shale as far as EUR per 1,000 feet of lateral. Class 2 injection wells. It's a big issue in Ohio today. Quite a few wells online and probably more coming. So we'll take a look at some of the wells that we're doing and looking at increase in injected volumes statewide beginning in 2011. And you can see the increase, again, the blue arrows show the increase year over year. So we had an 8% increase in volumes reported injected from 2014 to 2015. In that total volumes injected, which is about 23.4 million barrels of water, there were 141 wells that reported injection volumes in 2015. The top 10 injection wells by volume. The most volume injected was the Mosena #1 well by Elkhead Oil and Gas in Tuscarawas County, and it injected over 2 million barrels in 2015. And it's followed by the Buckeye Brine wells in Coshocton County, and then the Heckman or Nuvera Water Resources in Muskingum at 1.4 million barrels. So interesting to note, of these top 10 wells out of 141, 51% of the total water injected went into these top 10 wells. Injection counties. Athens County, over 3.8 million barrels of oil, followed by Coshocton, Muskingum, Tuscarawas, Portage, and Trumbull. This is through data provided by ODNR from the beginning of March. There's still some wells that haven't reported injected volumes for the fourth quarter 2015, but I think it's pretty complete. And again, these top 10 counties account for 87% of the total water injected. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Again, it's my privilege to do this for OOGA the second year in a row. I'd like to give some special thanks to the Ohio Oil and Gas Association, Bill Arnholt, Tim Knobloch, and Larry Wickstrom for some review and some nice photographs. So thank you for coming.